everybody. We are excited to be joining you for this next episode of Unlearning Out Loud. And I'm happy to say that I was this close, Melissa, to putting this almond in my mouth when it said 0. And if my sense of time had been off just slightly and I had this almond in my mouth,
it would have been me.
There is nothing like almonds to just like create like a haboob on the front of your teeth. There's something about the grain in an almond. Try it. When you get done listening to this podcast or you get done doing this podcast, take a couple almonds, chew on them. And then I dare you to say, pretend someone just walked in the room and you got to talk to them, and then try to clear your teeth. You won't be able to. So I might, and this is my fabulous co-host and the dignity of this podcast.
I'm Melissa Sador. Good to see everybody back. We're excited to have you join us for our Unlearning episode today. And what are we going to be talking about, Mike?
Well, we got some stuff to talk about. And I think this one's going to be, before anybody changes the channel, hits stop, hits pause, whatever. And because they think, oh, there goes those educators talking about education. Today is going to be talking about grades. And we're going to talk about, have we essentially graded away curiosity? Because we all lament what has happened with society. Why aren't people interested in learning? Why can't people pay attention for longer? We're pointing fingers in every which way. But the one question we have to ask is, if you had a choice of a kiddo coming out of school system with good grades, but they don't like learning, they hate it, they don't know how to learn on their own, they don't know how to navigate learning, and when we all agree that a lot of what we learn academically, like most of us agree, some of that stuff just fades away into the ether anyway, right? Yeah. So it's not about the facts. Yeah, right. I don't. Well, you implied that I learned Algebra 1 in the first place, but and so if you had a student that came out who had a high sense of curiosity, thought learning was a great thing, was capable of learning in the many, 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 many hours that they are not in school, and who's better prepared to navigate their future? And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. But I don't want anybody going, oh boy, here goes the hippy dippy, throw out the grades and let's all sit around and play Congo drums and smell like patchouli, because that's what we're going to talk about. I want people to understand, definitely from my perspective, I know you feel the same way, yep. Melissa, is I don't know that when I was a teacher, I was as high accountability of a teacher and rigor, because I know people get lost in this idea of, well, if you don't grade, then you're giving away rigor. And my question is, what is rigor? Is rigor this game that you play with the teacher? And, we play this little game. I turn in certain things on time. You give me a good grade. My parents are happy to get a sticker for the back of their car. Is that rigor? Or is that learning how to play a system?
Right.
I believe in pushing actual intellectual rigor. And I personally believe that traditional, not grading, not assessment, not measuring student progress, not communicating student learning and behavior and all the rest of it, but the grade itself undermines learning, curiosity, and goes against a lot of what we know about human psychology and what drives learning. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So nothing heavy.
No, just a little bit of a light conversation here on a typical Monday morning. No problem.
Yeah. So yes, it is Monday for us. I think it's going to be like 110 today here in Phoenix. I think it's our hottest day so far. So let's just get it cooking in here. But before we start, stuck in my crawl segment, you already heard me. I almost turned it into about almonds and the granularity of almonds. Mine is actually, I don't even, it's kind of half baked, but I've been grappling with this. And I guess it's not really a crawl to stuff.
Okay. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, it's more of what I'm thinking about. And I don't know if it should be stuck in my crawl.
Okay.
That is it's me. And to some degree, even us. Is, I'm interested in this idea right now of content creation. And as I read more and more, and I'm surrounded by more and more, real concerns being raised about the lack of a societal interest and ability to digest content that already strong content, especially long form content, right? Novels,
right?
Essays. Right? Things that aren't digestible in a TikTok video or in a 2-minute summary, or when I log on to Axios, which I really enjoy Axios as a reporting site. And, they have to put bullet points at the top because they know most people are never going to read the whole article, including why does this matter to me? And I know some people would say, what does it matter if people read long form? Well, there's a lot there, and we'll spend more time on that maybe in a future episode about how the brain works. But I think that this idea that we're in this rat race to create content, and do we really, how much? I mean, we do need new content because the world's changing, but how much? And I actually think the part where I'm going to get to the bone pick, because I do have a reason for like us to exist, which I think is that going back to that original idea of podcasting, which is just, getting a chance to communicate your voice, talking to people that may be interested, friends, relatives, people you don't get to talk to, and maybe it gets bigger than that. Maybe it doesn't. You don't really care, right? Like it's just this, democratizing of conversation. That I can rationalize. But the idea, have you noticed how many podcasts, including ours, they're not podcasts anymore, they're shows. They have to be video. Because I almost emailed you this week, Melissa, said, why are we videoing this? What is the point? And I understand, but then I answered my own question. I know what the point is, because you can't, compete. You can't get eyeballs. You can't get, right? And I'm not sure who we're competing with, but this idea, the whole idea of a podcast is it's supposed to be, originally it's an audio, right? It's something that you can, I don't want when I see that some of these podcasts are now turning up on Netflix, like my favorite movie podcast, The Big Picture.
Really?
Yeah, they're being signed as shows.
They're syndicating them.
And it's not so much like, I get that radio's been syndicated for, but shouldn't we be able to have a conversation with people but not cause them to have to, sit and watch? I'm trying to encourage people to listen. The idea is you can go walk your dog. You can go take a walk. You can go to the gym, because getting mad at me will really power your workout. You don't need Mudvayne to get you fired up for Prodigy. Just listen to me. But the idea that, I think the last thing the world needs is another excuse to stare at their phone.
How interesting. Right? I think this is fascinating because you're right. And when I first started podcasting, it truly was just audio. And the reason that I got into the video portion of it was because, to your point, I didn't want to be left behind. People were going for hey, we got to have both. You got to have the audio and the YouTube. And
the question is, now granted, there are shows that you incorporate visuals into their podcasts, and that's obviously different. And some, but even those you can do things with where you don't need to turn it into a video studio. And so I just really worry that literally everything we do is about gluing our faces to screens. And I personally hope, I don't mind recording, because we got to record the show anyway. So if I turn on the camera, I turn on the camera, and you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. I had a family member asking a question about one of our prior episodes, and they're like, "Well, I tried to watch it. I was like, "Don't watch it. Listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's easy to say when you turn on the lights and this is what you get, but and maybe if I, if you turn it on and you were getting Brad Pitt, maybe I'd tell people to sit and watch. But, the point is, I hope people are finding less reasons to look at their screens, not more. So that's my stuck in my crawl. And I'm still navigating how much of my crawl it's going to get stuck in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we'll have to continue to discuss that because obviously there's an episode there for sure.
Sure.
But that's interesting. I'm intrigued. I'm going to have to think about that now too. See, always give me things to think about. Maybe I need to do some unlearning around how we structure our content.
And almonds. Thinking about almonds. You got anything stuck in your crawl this week?
Salad.
Not your teeth, your crawl.
Yeah, no, salad.
Have
you noticed how quickly bags of salad that you get at the grocery store just kind of go? I mean, you get them home, and if you don't eat them that day, they turn weird colors and they start to go bad so fast. I'm like, how long have these things been on the truck that I get it home and all of a sudden it turns into crap? So I don't know. I have done more. Okay, I'll have to throw the lettuce away and I'll keep the dressing and all of the little things and I'll go get a head of lettuce so that I can use this dressing because the salad part went kaput.
Kaput.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that because I've oft complained of this and the fact that you get that black, brown,
It's
wet.
disgusting. Yeah, it's like,
And it's fine. I get it. I get produce ages. What I don't get is of any food product. Like, eggs, they have food they'll say best by June 12th. I guarantee you can be eating those eggs in August.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm float testing those suckers for months and they're fine,
and
right?
they're just
Meat
fine.
Yeah, meat is usually the expiration date is usually right on. Fish, right on. Why does it always say June 12th on the salad bag?
And it's June 1st, and the whole thing is a brown, soggy mess.
Yes. And June 1st, maybe it's the date that like it's going to sprout a new colony of spores. Maybe that's what that date is. Like that's the date that that it becomes The Last of Us, the HBO series with like the spores and the zombie apocalypse. So anyway, all right, well, let's just jump in because I know we wanted to do a succinct show today. I think we're going to, because we tend to have some of our shows wander and some be succinct. We thought, hey, let's be a little succinct today.
All right, let's do it.
So,
Set us up here.
Yeah, so let's just, we kind of set it up just a little bit. And the idea is, here's some things that I know. First of all, we have a crisis, in my opinion, in this country and this world of a lack of curiosity and this lack of enjoyment around learning. And that there's an expectation that the only kids that love learning and come out of school loving learning and are curious are gifted kids, right? They're always so curious, right? I love that 5th grade. He's gifted. Look how curious he is. He's always moving on to other things and learning new stuff, that he's asking questions. I wish everyone was this curious, right?
Yep.
Now, if you backpedal a few years from that 5th grade, if you stood at the front door of a kindergarten, every one of those kids come to the school system curious. Every rock is interesting. Every bug, every bird. They are so loaded with questions. It's why kindergarten teachers deserve hazard pay. They have questions about everything.
Yes.
Sometimes highly inappropriate, right? And we could go deeper into this someday, but in my opinion, having especially watched that age span in great detail, and then watching by the time they get to middle school, I don't even worry about talking about high school at this point, because by the time they get there, I feel like that cliff has already been fallen off of. That the Rubicon has been crossed, because by middle school, many kids have determined whether or not they feel like they fit into this game of learning, right? And I believe that to some degree, and there's a lot more going on there. I understand that people are going to go, well, kindergartners don't have hormones. Kindergartners don't care about, but I get all that. And that there's no doubt that there's other elements that come into play and other variables that introduce themselves over the years, notably hormones.
Yep.
But I would also argue that we grade it out of them. We grade a love of learning and curiosity out of students because they come to associate the word learning and the word school with this give and take cat and mouse game that they're going to over time play with a teacher to try to barter, essentially bartering for a grade. Right. That it may, and we can, so let's just go down the path of, okay, here, I know some people are getting, well, yeah, here we go. Here goes the lack of rigor conversation. I want my kid to be held accountable for their learning. Well, I can tell you, and I know, Melissa, I know you've seen this. You've got, loads of experience in so many grade levels, is the correlation between grades and learning and actual measurable learning is extremely inconsistent.
Agreed.
And oftentimes very low. A B in one teacher's classroom means something totally different in another teacher's classroom.
True.
And they're not necessarily aligned with the rigor from those two teachers.
True.
And quite often what's happened with grades, and I used to tell parents, look, your child is incredibly complex. if I asked you to describe, this is the first day I've met you as a new teacher for your child, and I said, guess what? I want to know all about your kiddo, but you have to tell me that in 3 or 4 symbols only. Pick some letters and symbols, and that's all you can share with me. And then I'll go on to learn your kid, right? Because it's laughable, right? You can't represent the complexity of anything in a single letter, right? That is loosely aligned with some random grading scale, right?
Yep.
So, I would love to down the road, if there's interest, go into more of some of the ridiculousness that even underpins letter grades. The idea that we use this 100-point scale, no one knows why. We do know why, right?
Easy percentages.
Yeah, easy percentages. But what most people don't know is statisticians, people that do measurement for a living, laugh at the education system's reliance on this 100-point scale, which would never be used in real scenarios where you needed accurate measurement, right? And a lot of that's tied to this idea of the intervals, right? You got 90 to 180, 98, and blah, blah, blah. But then also you got 59 to 0. And one of the fundamental sins in measurement is you don't have irregular intervals. You just would throw out any research study, any piece of anything that had a 59-point interval stuck on the end of it. It literally makes no sense as a measurement thing. It does make sense if you're trying to punish someone, right?
That's right.
And don't get me wrong, I'm all for punishing, right? Or having, I shouldn't say punish, that's not the right word, but I'm having accountability for learning. But dropping a kid off a 59-point cliff that they can't dig back out of.
They will not be able to dig back out of it. No.
And most of the time they won't even bother trying.
No.
Because they recognize that.
Right.
Right. And so this idea that, well, you know what, I'll teach them. I'll hit them with a big fat 59-point drop off. Right. Well, it doesn't teach them anything. And most of the kids that get, that's a repetitive behavior. You have the same kid in 5th and 6th and 7th. And I was one of those kids in some of those subjects. Like, why bother? I'm like, now it's just, if I could get a D, that would be impressive from where I am, right? So that's one thing. We've got all kinds of underlying measurement issues. You can still grade kids, you can still assess them, but using a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale, which is much more in line with what you would do with measurement. Then there's the idea of what the hell even goes into this grade, right?
Yeah. Participation.
Is it participation?
I like you. You put your name on the top of the paper so you get full credit. And if you didn't put your name on the top of the paper, I used to have people I worked with that would tape them up on the door. And if didn't claim the paper, if the student didn't claim the paper, it became a 0.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've done the work, which is, hopefully what you are trying to get at is that you have an understanding of, do they get the concept or do they not get the concept? And you're going to give them a 0 because they didn't put their name on the paper. So,
well, and again, it's because, and people say, well, you're encouraging responsibility. This teaches them responsibility. You know what? Here's the thing. There is no state standard necessarily for when you're trying to teach them conversion of fractions.
Right.
Your grade supposedly tells parents whether students can convert fractions. That's what that grade needs to articulate, whether or not they can do the math, right? Now, to back up my idea that this isn't about lack of rigor, I have 0 problem with the strictest teachers in my classroom keeping a kid in from, recess or calling the parents or whatever they want to do, right? To consequence the student for not doing what the rules were, right? Like I didn't, you're not putting your name. I've had to chase you down 4 times. I'm going to try to teach you to pay more attention to detail, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I'm choosing to do it. And we can talk about the best ways to do that. But there's no issue with delivering consequences or having high expectations or parents, if you want to ground your child or have them, heaven forbid, do extra babysitting duty or something, because they didn't turn in the homework or because they, were talking in class or they weren't being respectful. I used to tell my parents when I was both a teacher and a principal, you want to know how to navigate, because in parents' defense, they're just trying to figure this out, right? Sure. All they know is what was done to them, right? So I would always say, look, our report cards have a citizenship and study skills side. Most report cards do. The other side has some sort of a measurement of learning, right?
Yep.
Do not mix, as they said in Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams.
Yeah.
Just look at whatever it says about the learning and say, okay, it says here that you're getting there with the fractions. I mean, you're not there yet. We got to get a plan to get you on board with fractions. But don't ground them because they didn't understand fractions. If you look across the other side of the report card and it says, turns in their homework, listens attentively, participates well, is doing literally everything you're asking them to do, but they're still struggling with the fractions, that is a learning issue, right? Not a behavior issue. Vice versa, you could have a student who, it says on the other side, gets it, understands, came in here understanding fractions like no kid I've ever seen in my entire life. But then you look at the other side of the report card and guess what? Is disrespectful in class, doesn't bother to turn in homework, write everything, more negative on the student's citizenship. You know what? It is perfectly viable that you would ground your child and they brought home straight A's because you are trying to reinforce the study skills, the rigor, the accountability, right? But the problem is that opens up other questions. If you've got a student who's acing all the learning and they're having what does that say about the need for your instruction and whether or not we should be looking at what kiddos should be doing right during their day? So
are we challenging them? Is this content that's just above their learning level so that there's, some need or desire to stretch? Do they have that? Do they have that goal of being able to? If they're in 5th grade and they're doing 5th grade math, but they're capable of doing 7th or 8th grade math, why are we not making sure that they have access to that kind of content? So
exactly. And so I think that this, and a cynic or someone who's worked with middle school kids will say, look, you guys are talking about this dream student who's just not being challenged enough. And I've got plenty of kids who are just being little jerks because their hormones are through the roof.
Right.
And they do just enough to demonstrate. And they don't want to be challenged, right? They don't want the extra. And I might say, you know what? You are absolutely right. But so those very students are the ones that you got to report on the study skills side.
Yeah.
These kids aren't getting it done in terms of being participants in this learning community. Let's work together on getting that through, right? Getting that improved. So we have this whole notion of kind of this, and the funny thing is, I feel like this is the dirty little secret that everyone in the room knows. Yeah, everyone in the room knows that grades are more dependent on who the teacher is. They're hodgepodge.
Yeah,
and the last thing, if you want one last piece of evidence that grades actually as a concept are kind of as traditionally employed are pretty ridiculous, is I never did extra credit as a teacher. And my answer for why, and as a principal, I really leaned into why would we be doing extra credit? That last minute, look, I can do a couple worksheets to get an A. And that A is supposed to show that you know science or math or reading. When in my classroom, I'll give you every opportunity to demonstrate you've learned it, right? I would let you reassess. I'll give you the test again, right?
Yep.
Your parent, and quite often it's the parent that would call me and say, can I get some work for him to do to get his grade up? He's got to get an A or a B, all right? And I'd say, no, but they can take the test again to show me that they understand it at that level, right?
Fair.
I'll let them take it infinitely. Because I'm interested in telling you whether they understand the content, right? Not having us do this little circus routine at the end of the quarter,
right?
So that they can get a certificate saying that they were on honor roll in 4th grade, right? And so I think a kid, not getting that A in science. I did tell a parent this once as a principal. It was funny. We both laughed, but I said, look, I've never seen a kid not get into Stanford because they got a C in 4th grade science. Right? But I have seen kids that may not get into Stanford because they've learned they can game a system.
That's true. And don't know the content.
Right. And so I'd rather them understand that this is about learning, not a game. Yep. Right. So,
although I will tell you that people that do well at school, and typically teachers and people that go into education, have figured out this game and are pretty good at playing it. They are good at the game. The cat.
It's one of the reasons we can't get changed, right? So that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. Is one last thing I do want to mention though is that, you know, in terms of the learning science, there's loads of research, as you well know, about why grades are the worst. If you want to motivate learning, that grading is just ice in the face of everything we understand in science. And that literally, shifting a child's reward circuitry from intrinsic to extrinsic motivation, it becomes not for the actual enjoyment of the process of learning. We're training kids to only learn when you have to,
right?
And only for an external award, right? And so between that and the fact that we have this in our head that, you know, any kid that gets an A, we all know that A over here and A over there is different. There is no standardization of these letter grades, right? So it's a mess. I think everybody knows it. No one wants to deal with it. And so why? Well, and for those of you who aren't educators listening to this, which I'm sure is most of you, this is well known in the field. That there you won't find a teacher or a principal or a district office administrator that isn't well versed in the science of what is wrong with grading. But typically what you'll run into is the yeah buts. Well, here's why we know it's not the best thing, but here's why we haven't been able to make a change. And so we want to talk a little bit about what those are, and then we can explore them deeper in a non-succinct episode down the road someday. Is one of the big reasons is internal. It's in the field, right? You just mentioned a key point. A lot of people that have gone on to become teachers and especially administrators are high achievers, right? If, you know, we have these great teachers that decide, hey, I'm going to go on and be a great administrator. I'm going to go, right? Or great teachers who stay in the classroom and decide I'm going to be a great teacher. And a lot of them come to don't get me wrong, I've had tons of great teachers that have really gotten smart with their grading and really doing great things with kids. But we also have a lot of teachers who they got to where they are by playing the game. They were good game players, right? And they may be smart. I'm not discounting that at all. But to them, this system really worked for them. And the hope is, and this is well-intentioned, is, look, I figured out how to play the game and it worked for me. And that's not what they're thinking overtly, but that's what's happening is, if this worked for me, it can be done. Look, we just got to get people we just got to do a better job. Right.
Sure.
This system works, and this is the way, you know, it worked for me. So it'll work for you. You know, my pushback is always like, look, and I know this is uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, is ultimately, in spite of all the conversation and all the conferences and all the workshops and all the guest speakers, ultimately the American education system, which is a misnomer, right? We don't really have one. It's just more of a state by state, but sure. The American education system has operated on this bell curve of failure, low mediocrity, some improvement to elite forever. It's never changed, right? The only thing that's really, and yes, I know there are margin conversations about, oh, we've seen spikes in this and spikes in that, and we have, and oh, we've seen these school districts that have done this and that. This is true, none of which has been scalable to the entire system or sustainable, right? So in other words, what we keep doing continues to give us the same results. If there's anything we understand about systems thinking, right, is the system that the results you get from your system the system is producing those results. Right.
So here's a question, and maybe I'm taking us down the wrong direction. And so if I am, stop me. But doesn't this speak to mastery grading, which is something that you see quite often in the primary grades, where you've got kindergartners, first graders, second graders that have a mastery-based report card. It's not A's, B's, and C's, because that doesn't make any sense according to what they're trying to teach them and make sure that, you know, they're reading and they have some sense of numeracy. So it's mastery based against a set of standards that really do make sure that there's no arbitrariness in whether or not can the kid count by 5s to 100. They either can or they can't. If they can't,
Right.
then we work to make sure that they can. If they
Right.
can, we move on to, okay, now they're going to count by 2s. But that kind of mastery level kind of grading system, you don't see very often in other grade levels outside of primary. And maybe that's something that we're missing. And Mike, do you remember, and I'm going to forget the two, there was the park system, but they were basically national standards that that the governors got together from all 50 states and put together some education standards. There was park and there was something else, and Arizona was the something else. And it was all about standardizing what is
Common Core standards.
Yep, Common Core. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it was all about standardizing what every child from each grade level was expected to know, so that there was, you take the arbitrariness out of, this is what we're trying to get to in terms of mastery by the time they leave this grade level, which is part of what I remember grading conversations coming out of and saying, yeah, zeros are not a good idea, especially when we're trying to get to this level of understanding around these math concepts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I think these are all things to revisit. And I think mastery, the idea that, you tell me what's more rigorous, a student being required to demonstrate that they can do what's expected of an 8th grader, right? Or a 6th grader, or random letter grade, right? That is a hodgepodge of God knows what, right? And so this goes back to our theme when people say, why are you doing this episode? Well, this goes back to that system 1, system 2, elephant, right? Right. The brain wants the easy answer. And right, the brain wants to not have to think too hard about this, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea that we would have to peel back an onion a few layers is uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable because it pushes back on tradition, which is one set of issues, right? It's uncomfortable because it requires an attention and level of cognitive energy that's not required of letter grades. Okay, I see a D, I go into autopilot, I ground, I take away the toys, I limit the Xbox time, and I'm good. I'm being a good parent, right? And again, this is not a criticism of parents. This is all we know.
Right.
It's no one's fault. It's all we know. But I would challenge people that when you hear something like this, or you hear this brought up, it's no longer all you know, right? That's the point of the conversation, right? Is now we're starting to make choices to do something that we have lots of evidence is not helpful for your child.
Right.
Right. So now we're moving out of the, well, I just didn't know. Well, right. This is the hard work, right? This is hard work. And so the idea that teachers and parents and students should be having detailed conversation about what students know and can do is hard work.
Yeah.
Right. And just because we may get resistance, because sometimes you've had schools that have tried to push grading reform and the community has pushed back, right? So that's external pressure saying give us what we know, right? Because they feel like that's rigor and we understand why. So the problem comes for the school, not doing the mechanics of changing grades, but starting with helping your community understand why it's important. The school that I was principal of for 8 years was very actively engaged parent community, and with kids that had figured out how to play the letter grade game forever, right? And it really was a boat rocking experience for us to change up how we were doing it. But I got a group of teachers on board first, like some incredible teachers. And then by the time the whole staff was on board, took the year, let them communicate to the parents and be the voice of it, right? It's not an administrative driven thing. It's us. Once the parents understood it, we were able to overturn a bit of a system. Granted, we had district parameters we couldn't change, but we learned how to play a bit of it. That's another thing that you see school districts do is they try to serve two masters, right? You try to put letter grade on top of a bunch of mastery scores.
Yep.
And the reality is they don't align.
No, they don't.
Right. It's a game that you play. And then you also, when you say, I gave you this child a C in science, and then I got a bunch of 4s, 3s, 2s, 1s underneath of them, some things started to happen is, yeah, it's well-intentioned, but there's no way to correlate the complexity of the data underneath that letter grade. Between the letter grade, it doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from a measurement standpoint, it doesn't work. And all that I saw start to happen was teachers, again, we ended up kind of all over the place because a lot of teachers were putting their heart and soul into those 4, 3, 2, 1s. They come to me and say, all the parents looking at is the letter grade on top, right? Or some teachers who kind of were flippant about the 4, 3, 2, 1s and just were like, look, all the parents are going to care about is the letter grades, right?
Yeah.
And so it just continues to be a hodgepodge. So one of the reasons that we haven't moved on this is one more thing on the Common Core. Common Core and other standards, right? Have always been about identifying what students should know or be able to do at a particular benchmark point in time. Right. What it normally doesn't necessarily do is with any kind of complexity, identify how you score that, right? That complexity comes within the school system,
That's
within
true.
this class. And yes, it'll say, demonstrates the ability to blah, 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 but how many times, in what context, in what, right? Like
exactly right.
Those not articulated, that's up to school systems. So yeah, there's been lots of attempts at this, but since we can never get to the point where we agree on how to measure it, other than what? State standardized tests, right?
That's
Which is a whole nother conversation. And I'm, just to give a sneak preview, I'm not anti-state standardized tests, but what I am anti is having your entire school system driven and, obsessively pre-testing and post-testing and benchmark. And I get it. The schools are doing what they have to do because of the state system. So
right.
What's happening, and anybody who's listening to this conversation can figure out, is there are so many layers of obstruction to making a simple improvement at a classroom level. The one that we haven't even talked about is ultimately a high school teacher will look at you and say, well, why should I bother? The colleges are asking for the GPA.
That's right.
Right? They want to know and so what can we do about it? Right? Well, but, and I can't because, and, my first step towards look, if we want to change something, we got to say, stop pushing the blame upwards and say, look, my job is to give you, if I'm an 8th grade teacher, I look at a high school teacher and say, look, my job is to give you not a student who's comfortable with letter grades. My job, according to the state, according to my contract, is to help 8th graders learn this content.
Yep.
To the best, to give you a student who's most prepared in mathematics for your math class.
That's right.
Right? If you decide to take them off, yeah, that's what's going to prepare them for success. Yeah. If they have to take a couple weeks to adapt to how you grade, that's between you and them, right? I'd rather rather do what I know works for learning, not what makes it easy for you to explain to the kids why your grading system is archaic, right? And so that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm backed up by facts. Again, no one would argue, what is my job as an 8th grade teacher? To teach math, to teach reading, to teach to the best of my ability. And I have buckets of evidence that this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Not how to teach them how to play a system for some time down the road. And we're also at this really interesting point where colleges and universities are in their own crisis, right? You're seeing colleges and universities. I saw Dr. Crow from Arizona State had a fascinating co-authored a paper just a few weeks back. I think it was within the last couple of months about the evolving nature of what universities have now become. And it's something completely different. And I got news for anyone in a K-12 system. What we're doing does not feed that vision. They will not be ready to be a part of the university system that Dr. Crow describes. And, is really thought-provoking. So why isn't it happening? We've got internal problems, right? We've got the complexity of the work. We've got external problems. We've got a community that struggles to understand it because they don't know anything else or they haven't been exposed to it. We've got these concepts of rigor. Well, if you throw away grades, then rigor, and the idea that the misconception that if you throw out grades, you're throwing out a measurement.
Right. Well,
right.
What's really interesting is you talk about the system being slow to change and not really being able to be responsive. And COVID sure proved that otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had university systems that did things differently because of the kinds of things that were happening at the high school level for graduates that were then moving on to a 4-year or 2-year system. And they were able to do things differently in response to that. So it is possible. I'm not sure if the will is there to do something at scale to change how we do grading, to change how we think about students being competent in standards or skills or aptitudes.
Well, and so there's so much to talk about here that we can't fit into a single episode. And I think we can parse out some subtopics down the road based on interest. But I think that the reality is this: no one could present me any evidence otherwise that as a system, as a nation, as a state, have we created a system that produces learners, curious learners who are actively engaged in the world around them, right? Because of the school system that they participate in, right?
Yeah.
The evidence, the overwhelming evidence, and decades of it suggests no. Doesn't even suggest, it's clear. We have bell curve, right? We have a bell curve in terms of achievement, right? So even these state level assessments we're using are still only producing what amounts to socioeconomically aligned for the most part. I know someone's going to go, well, not my, we've managed it. Yeah, but first of all, can you sustain it over 10 years, 5 years? Can you do it as an entire state? Can you do it?
Yeah.
And again, no one's been able to raise their hand and say, we have, right?
Well, yeah, the Mississippi miracle that happened with reading, but they're struggling right now.
Yeah,
just a few years later, they're struggling again.
And I'm glad you brought up the Mississippi miracle, because that was brought up by I don't know if I talked about this in a prior podcast, but in a meeting with a gubernatorial candidate who cited the Mississippi miracle as how she was going to shape her education policy. And again, just the title, the Mississippi miracle, pushes the conversation back into system one.
It does.
And the element. Right?
It does.
Oh, cute. What a name. It's a miracle. Oh, there's an easy answer that creates this miracle where kids read. We just have to do insert blank, right? So beware of, we always say, beware of anything that has a name like that, right? It's true. Probably BS. And did they do some amazing things in Mississippi? Absolutely, right? But they had anomaly levels of, first of all, spending on teacher support, teacher training, investment, national board training for they did things that were unsustainable or states aren't willing to sustain, right? Like if people want to come to me and say, look, we're willing to overhaul the entire system and how we spend and then we'll have a different conversation. But the reality is we're moving in the other direction when it comes to support for education, right? So the Mississippi miracle turns out to be short-term, turns out to be unsustainable, right? And it's not, and so I'm not here to say that there aren't significant angles that we can take to create sustained learning. There are, right? There are things we know that work, science of reading, et cetera, et cetera. We know they work, but we still end up with, and I know everybody will point to, well, if kids can learn to read by third grade, that's the biggest indicator that they're going to be successful. And that is true. It's also no guarantee. And we also don't have all of our third graders ever reading.
Right.
And the thing I do know is that if you ever walk into a middle school classroom, there are a lot of kids in that room that were eager learners 5 years, 6 years, 7 years earlier, who are dying for the bell to ring. They don't care. They don't see a connection. They don't think they can play this game. And if the answer is, well, tough, that's the system. Well, then we are just resigning ourselves to a bell curve at best, right?
Yeah, you're creating a dropout is what you're doing at that point.
Right. Or just a kid that's never going to live. Some of these kids will go on and they'll be fine. They'll get a job and all that, but they will never be, there's the serving the system, serving the outcome, serving the state tests, serving do they get a job? Do they get into college? And then there's the serving what do you hear people complaining about more than anything more right now as a society is how uncurious people are.
Unengaged.
it is for them to believe anything they hear, how they're not critical thinkers
Right.
and they're highly educated, right? We did a thing on conspiracy theories where even people that have been through an education system, who have been to, high level universities, still fall prey to these things that you would think would be reserved for morons, right? So what does that tell you about our system, about what we're teaching, about how successful we're being about the thing? Because I still look at you look at any school right now, mission statements, their goals, their beliefs, their values, they all get in this room and they talk about, lifelong learners who are curious and adaptable and collaborative. It's all wishful thinking unless we're willing to do something drastic under the hood.
Yeah.
Right. So I can paint Lamborghini on the side of my Datsun all I want. It's still a Datsun. Right. Like, and I know people go, what the hell's a Datsun? I know I'm dating myself there.
Where
right?
aren't you?
Right. And so it's nice. It's well intentioned, and people believe they're going to move the kids in that direction. But as a system, we don't measure any of that. We don't value curiosity. We don't put any investment in it, and we don't enthusiasm for learning. We don't care, right?
Yeah.
And what I found is, and this will kind of be the last point because we got to move to closure, is that people will point to kids that come out. I just went to a graduation for a student from Xavier, which is a private. For those that don't know, a private high school here, has a wonderful track record of success with students. And this kid is a rock star, straight A's, going on to Georgetown, the siblings going on to Georgetown. She's going on to U of A, probably on to God knows what, she'll probably be in charge of me in some way, shape or form soon, a major achiever. But what's interesting is that people will point to letter grades, system, rigor produced this. I would say no. First of all, the girls that are in her little peer group, who are all rock stars, all came from very different school systems. A couple of them were from Montessori schools, which are in some ways much more aligned with what we're talking about.
That's right.
And guess what? They got dropped into a very, somewhat, I shouldn't say very traditional. I don't want to pigeonhole Xavier, but are widely known as highly rigorous classical education to some degree, right? And they all absolutely just beat the doors off of it. They were great. They did wonderfully. And what I know is every one of those kids loves learning. And you know why? I know some of their families, because it's about the museum trips. It's been about the road trips. It's been about the travel. It's been about the conversation. It's been about the reading.
The system at home that is a difference maker.
And their interaction with learning at home, even if they have a teacher who makes it not a great experience, their image of what learning actually can look like and should look like is being lifted by the people at home, right? So the kids who don't get that, it's our responsibility, right, to create that same stimulating, exciting, creative environment in the classroom. Not say, well, I sure hope you've got someone at home that teaches you learning is fun, because it ain't happening here, right? So grading, and I know we've gone off on a lot of different places here, but we knew this was going to be a riff episode, right? Because we're in our wheelhouse. But what I would ask people to think about is be interested in this topic, ask questions, really think about, does this letter grade on my child's report card tell me really much of anything other than they played a game? They played the game to a certain degree. Can I really turn around and tell anyone what I know about my child's learning, right? Can the child tell me anything about what they know about their learning? And if those answers are all no, we're not serving the child. We're just playing this game, and know that our instinct is going to be to stick with what we know, right? It worked for me. It's rigor. When we know it's not, it's just game playing disguised as rigor.
Right.
And know that everything inside of us, all of our natural evolutionary wiring, is going to push us away from fixing a problem that we all, on some level, we know it exists.
Yeah.
So speaking of a problem we know exists, and we don't talk about it, is you haven't asked me about my shirt today.
Oh my gosh. Tell me about your shirt, because it's a step away from what we normally have here, Mike.
I know I don't have a concert shirt today, right? I know you're surprised. Although I do have a great sticker I picked up at the I went to a Devo concert, and I got a song that says Devo is right, and I'm starting to agree with them. That the whole concept Devo stands for de-evolution. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that society is moving people backward. Yeah, it's a whole other conversation. And so I was going to go with the shirt, and then I thought, wait a minute, World Cup. And I love soccer. I love World Cup. I love Euro Cup. I love cups of beer. I love cups of water. I love soccer cups. I love cups. And so who doesn't love a good cup? I like Brick from Anchorman. I love cup. I love lamp. I love,
lamp.
You know what? I like cups. I also like bottles.
Ooh.
Anyway, cups and bottles. And so anyway, this is my Netherlands.
Oh, okay.
The orange stripe. Pretty
very
cool,
nice.
My Netherlands.
Very nice.
My Netherlands
the
training.
lion.
Yeah. Well, it's not the one. That's funny because I thought the same thing when I first saw it when I was younger. That also dates us, right? Does anybody drink Lowenbrau anymore?
Does it?
We should bring Lowenbrau back.
Tonight is kind of special. The beer commercial when they actually had beer commercials on TV, which they don't.
Yeah,
but
hey, how about the next one? You bring a Lowenbrau because it's a podcast. We can record.
That's true.
And you know what? I could bring a Colt 45. Remember Billy D. Williams?
Oh my God.
Or Schlitz malt liquor?
I have my husband's grandparents owned a corner bar in Milwaukee, and I have Schlitz cups from when they were at the bar. They were bar glasses. Yeah,
those
Schlitz.
are cool. I want to get some of those.
Yeah, nickel beer cups.
Okay, that's cool. That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
Schlitz, or I just remember Billy D. Williams doing the Colt 45 commercial. And then I can't say Schlitz malt liquor without him thinking of that comedian, Eddie, I forget his name. He was in that movie he played himself twice, and he's like, got some Schlitz malt liquor. And he always said it that way. It just cracked me up. So I got to say Schlitz malt liquor. Anyway, it's not the Lowenbrau line. It's the Netherlands jersey. And no, for those of you who are going to automatically go, I knew he was anti-American. No, not anti-American at all. I have a brand new USA jersey. I've got jerseys from all over. I've got Germany. I've got an Iceland jersey, for God's sakes.
Well, I'll wear my Mexico
jersey. But
my husband just bought me a Mexico jersey.
Oh, very cool.
And
I just think it's great.
That Mexico is actually going to let students out a month early so that they can watch the World Cup without having to worry about going to school.
Well, it's nice to know we've got our priorities straight. Maybe the staff can use that.
It'll be curiosity in action.
Maybe the staff could use that time to address ideas and strategies to increase curiosity.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know. So World Cup starts. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure you do, World Cup starts here very soon. It's like 35 days or something. Should be a blast. Should be a good time. And go. I'm just happy to see it happen. So I thought I'd wear this today. Maybe I'll wear a few more over time. So I don't know. I know I was going to say it's top of your mind every episode, but apparently it's not.
Well, I did wonder, and then we just started talking. So then it left.
Fair. I'll give you that. All right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap up. Stay tuned. Remember, Melissa has the same closing message every episode, and that is,
please make sure that you like, subscribe, share this video and audio with friends, and make sure that you give us a 5-star rating. We really do appreciate when we get feedback from our listeners, and so do make sure that you're subscribed.
And I've got probably 500 or 600 friends on Facebook that have not clicked like, subscribe, or shit. I get people telling. So I'm looking at all of you, all of you. If you haven't clicked. You don't remember, what do I always say? She's got the decent message. My message is, I don't even care if you listen. We just like hearing ourselves talk. But just click like or subscribe and or share it on your feed.
Help us out, folks.
Even if you just drop it on your Facebook feed and say, listen to this idiot in the Netherlands jersey. Have you ever heard such a moron? I'm fine with that. I don't care, because morons trend as well as anyone else.
This is true. I've seen lots of TikToks that do that. So
yeah. So all right. Well, thanks for listening or watching, everyone. We will see you on the next episode of Unlearning Out Loud.
See you soon.